All right, Albert, welcome back. How are you today?
Good, buddy. Thanks for having me back, man. How are you doing?
Doing good. Doing good. I think we have power back on at the Northern 70 as of this weekend. So that was about 2 weeks or so without power. Um
Wow.
it's still a mess up there. I'm gonna head up this week and bring Easton and going up for Easter. I'm just gonna chainsaw and pick up stuff with the grapple, and because the driveway's still blocked off or stuff in the yard is still there's big trees in the food plot. Um, it's still a war zone up there. So
Wow. Did you guys have a lot in the fridge and freezers?
those are still sitting there. So there was meat in the freezer for sure. We cleaned out the fridge mostly, but yeah, that'll be on the top of the list when I get there too. Hopefully it won't be too rancid. But
Yeah, we've had that happen before. Actually a couple of times, just because yeah, I mean you've been to my place. It's so
yeah.
rural that even like a general high wind storm, nothing like what you all experienced, but we would lose power like for anywhere from 3 to 5 days, like regularly. And after so many times of having to burn uh, old meat and stuff, because like what else you gonna do with it, you know? So like we just decided we finally got a Generac after about a decade. It runs off our gas well, and that was, and they're not cheap, man. But I tell you what, the peace of mind that comes with that has been tremendous. It's I won't say it's paid for itself in saving meat, but it's probably close. I mean, just because you know, if the power goes off, that thing kicks on, which is really nice.
I like how it's ran off the well. We're gonna have to do it off of propane. Um, but to your point, even like the meat itself, okay, but even pipes freezing or anything else, like if this storm was in January and it was, -2 at night and we had no power, no heat for a week, that could have been a different story. So
Mhm.
that alone will, having to rip out walls and carpet and redo everything from a flood, that alone will be worth it. And I know an electrician. Hutchie's an electrician, so gonna bring him up
Yeah,
there and get one
and
in.
that is key, especially if he's done those before, because um, I know Generac has certified dealers, but they're not always certified like installers.
Okay.
And there's other brands now too. I mean, Generac's, I'm like 90% sure that's what ours is. I mean, I think Kohler makes a good one now. There's a few different ones, but I do know that you got to make sure somebody who knows what they're doing. Now, ours was a little bit, again, a little bit different because it had to do with coming off a raw gas well, like coming out
Mm-hmm.
of the ground. And there were some conversions. They were explaining it to me because I'm not familiar with it, but like in the piping, because like your feed, let's say, and I don't remember, but say it's a 4-inch feed, and you got to neck that down to fit that raw gas, and it's like to a half inch, So there's whatever it is. So anyhow, there's some tweaks and stuff, and then also if you have it hooked up um, to like the Wi-Fi. So like there's ways to do like software updates and all that. So there's like a
Oh.
technical side as well, but then you can see on your phone like because you can have it set I think for every day or 2 days where it like kicks on and just does like a test cycle, and it just makes sure that everything's tripping properly and not and closing properly and whatnot. So I'm sure Hutchie knows a hell of a lot more than I do, but it's definitely good to have somebody who knows what they're doing to put it in.
Yeah, good call. I love that automatic programming. I wonder how many of our listeners have similar setups in their places up in the woods, where they probably have us all figured out by now. And I'm over here sitting here going, "Oh, I'm gonna clean out the freezer again." So,
Yeah. You could
do
do a
you?
whole podcast just on like what are tricks
Yeah,
to having a place that's in a rural area, satellite dish, or do you want to do satellite internet, or there's so many different options now, and it's only getting better, um, which is great. But yeah, I think you guys will be happy with the generator.
do you do anything in the freezer like a frozen glass of water with a quarter on top of it, or any little thing like that, or just
No,
yeah,
no. Only thing we ever do is keep a thing of baking soda in the fridge and the freezer just to keep the
yes,
freshness. But other than
yes,
that, not really. I try not to keep too awful much, that's like I don't keep like back straps or anything like that, just because it's
same.
like if I lose that, you might be out for a year. You lose all your back straps, like that would stink. So I try to keep stuff that's like quick, hot pocket stuff that if you don't want to throw the money away, obviously nobody wants to throw food away. But if it does go bad, you kind of go, okay, well, it is what it is. We didn't lose something I'm going to have to go and hunt to refill the freezer on. So that's kind of what we've done, but nothing too fancy.
Okay. That's good to know. Yeah, same with us. I have a couple packs of venison in there, probably a couple frozen pizzas for
Yeah.
those days off the farm late where you're not going to cook a full dinner and just so yeah, I'll be emptying that out. The kids are going to come up after the basketball game on Saturday, so Easton and I will be up there for a few days yeah, a day or two before them trying to just get stuff cleaned up. I have 25 or 30 Norway spruce I'm going to put in the ground. Um,
Nice.
I'm going to frost seed some switchgrass because there's still snow. So should be able to get that in. And then, yeah, been ready. Been ready to get up there and kind of button that up. It's been weighing on my mind quite a bit here, trying to, you know, worry about that. But you've been going down to your farm quite a bit. We're going to talk some timber management, some TSI today. I've been out cutting. You've been out cutting. What the heck you been up to, dude? You've been down there a few times cutting.
Yeah, yeah, I've been cutting a lot. I mean, it's been big NRCS equip contracts for the last several years. So I had been doing prior to the big cutting, which is labor of love for sure, is the invasive removal, as well as some grapevine removal. And that's just all herbicide work and primarily basal treating. So it's, diesel fuel, triclopyr, backpack, and you got to do it. I mean, ideally, when the tree's putting everything back down into the root system. So that's really it's very difficult because ideal time is like around June. So a lot of times years where you're treating is full of multiflora rows. So you get lashed up. It's warm, and then you're trying to, those tree of heaven specifically. I mean, you literally leave if you basal treat them and you don't get clear around and you get three quarters. And I know because if there's a mistake to be had, I've done it. And if you get three quarters of the way around, or maybe even more, and leave a strip that you don't get that herbicide on, that tree will die three quarters of the way and it will still produce seed heads on the one piece that's living. And it is unfreaking believable how resilient those trees are. I mean, I almost have a slight respect for them in the sense that like they are just that resilient of a
Yeah.
species. Um, so that was like, it's basically a 2 year project because you're going to go through, you're going to treat a bunch and you're going to think you got them all. And then you're going to go back and a whole bunch of other ones, even with basal treating, they're still going to stump sprout and stuff. Not as much as if you do like a hack and squirt or something like that. Those tree of heaven specifically will try to stump sprout. Or you'll just miss some, or you'll just have some that grew from seed and they grow so fast. So you go back a second time. And I did that. And it's so cool to see because actually my buddy Greg, who Greg, we were shed hunting a little bit just a couple of weeks ago, and he and I were walking through this one area that I did it, and he and I both were commenting, it's like you almost looks like I ran a chainsaw in here because the canopy is so wide open now, and it's because all of those tree of heaven, you have a group. A lot of times they go in groups, so you have like 5 or 10, and you spray
Okay.
them, and then after a year or two, they just turn to like almost paper, and they just dry out and fall over and the canopy is just like wide open. I mean, it's absolutely perfect. And so that was one of the things I had done. And then last year I worked on this big bottom. Brian helped me quite a bit, um, and that was a lot of just coal tree removal. So basically, you got a big money poplar, you got a maple, and whatever else might be ironwood, a crooked oak that's never going to have timber value, stuff like that. Okay, well, we're going to remove everything except this yellow poplar because that's a money tree. We're going to cut everything else. And it's amazing how much sunlight you can get into the ground and still have money trees. And we did that and hammered that out last year. And then right above that area, basically running along this bench was a 6 acre, what they call mid-story removal on the NRCS contract. And that's probably what most of the listeners and viewers are doing, right? And what that is, I mean, unless you're going in there and you're felling 18 DBH oak trees, um, most guys are probably cutting everything from like that, the size of your pinky up to say 8 inch, maybe 10 inch, right? And that's really what a mid-story removal is. So this particular area was dominated from a money crop tree, uh, red oak, chestnut oak. Trying to think what maybe a couple white oaks on that side, but primarily chestnut oak and red oak. And then the mid-story was full of beech, maple,
Yep.
sassafras, nothing that is ever really going to be in our market. This doesn't isn't a blanket statement because there are certainly markets in Michigan, I would imagine, where maple wood might have a good market. For us, you have to have like an 8 foot straight, I mean, perfectly straight, no big knot red maple. Anything else is not going to really bring much, at least
Okay.
that I've ever been told in my region. So I follow my forester's advice on that. And she's like, if you want, like, there might be some money, but other than that, like, cut it. So I always lean towards like I'm going to cut a little bit harder and worry about like the big straight oaks and stuff. So that area was 6 acres. It's like on the side of a hill. That's tough working. I mean, with the slate and rocks that you have in southeastern Ohio, like so we were cutting that. And I did most of that myself. I had some help. Brian helped me finish up an area. Um, the nice thing is you're on the side of a hill. The bad thing is you're on the side of a hill. So the nice thing is that the trees tend to want to go downhill. So if you want to, you do a nice face cut and then just come with a backing cut. 90% of that time, that tree just wants to go. Um, and that's really a neat thing to see because you end up having such good sunlight hitting the ground and such good side cover and everything just coming up. And then, somebody had commented, I think last year, Brian had shared a video and somebody's like, oh, wow, like you guys fell a lot of trees. Are you worried about the deer maneuvering through? And obviously, it's nice if you can go in and cut trails. I just don't have the time. Those deer figured it out. It's amazing how fast those treetops. I think you were talking about that in one of your videos on the 40. How fast those treetops break down and deer just
Yep.
find their way around them. So we have trails going through everywhere. The only negative I'll say, and we can talk on this later from my experience. So I passed those three equip contracts, and now I'm starting on the next one. So that's some of my newest videos have been. I'm cutting another. I don't know what that is, a 17 or 20 acre bottom, and I'm cutting that a little bit more aggressively. So that's probably pretty close to being ready for a timber harvest. Um, but there's a lot of nice like oak in there that are like mid-story right now, and they're never going to be anything unless we remove the overstory. But there's also a lot of competition. Like I found some box elders, like there's some old crabapple trees that had been in there, like that are so shaded. Like if it was on the edge of a field, I might try to release the crabapple, but I'm talking like middle of a bottom. There's a lot of crooked maple, again, a lot of sassafras, quite a bit of beech. I have like a real big dislike for beech in my area. Um,
Yep. Mm.
and I'm trying to think what other species I've been cutting hard. Obviously maple, um, but there's even also some young, nice walnuts in there that are like about at the canopy level, but they just have to like grow out, and there's no room to expand. So my forester and I marked that, and I've been cutting that pretty hard as well. I hope to finish that this year. I'll actually be ahead of my NRCS contracts, and then with that money that I get from it, I can put it right back into the farm. So as I mentioned, Greg bought a skid steer about 6 months to a year ago. I don't remember exactly. And since he's bought it, he's kind of started to acquire more equipment, a tree shear, an auger, and as you know, with time, that's the most limiting factor. So to be able to say like, hey, I got 3 grand from this NRCS contract, then I'll take that and say, okay, well, I want to put a big food plot up on this top. I'm going to pay Greg to clear that. It's all junk. other than the oaks, I'll mark those, clear that with the tree shear, skim it off. Now I got a 2 acre field. Oh, and by the way, I want to put a gate there. Use that auger, put the gate, and in 2 days, I can pay him, whatever it might, half that amount. Maybe it's 1,500, maybe it's 2 grand, and get all that done in 2 days. And it's like a new farm, So I try to always dump that money back in. But I'll say the only bad thing that I've experienced so far with this is I've been a little bit disappointed with the stump regeneration. Um, some of that I think is just my own learning. Like I've caught a lot of trees over the years, but I feel like I've always noticed some level of stump sprouting. And I think maybe just when you cut larger groups, like you're going to maybe have 50% that do and 50% that don't. So some of it's, I think, just that and also closer observation on my part. But some of it's also a deer density. The forester talking to me and saying, yeah, if you see bitternut hickory browse, now they might take a bite or two, but if you see it browse real hard, like that's typically not a desirable or highly desirable species, and it's like, hold my beer because like half hour later I'm walking, I'm like, look at this, and then it's like then beech, they typically we want you to treat every beech stump with herbicide. And I'm like, oh, that kind of stinks because now you're carrying a saw and now you're carrying your file or your extra chains and your bar roll and then oh by the way now I gotta I'm back here with a backpack sprayer. Lucky for me, the deer are eating the beech stumps and to the point that they're not regenerating, for the most part and stuff like that. So, good thing in that case, silver lining, but the bad case is obviously, we got to make more food with a chainsaw, plant more
Yep.
food, with some of the vitalized destination and clovers and things like that, which we're doing. And then obviously we have to continue to harvest um, antlerless deer.
Yep. Would you say that the NRCS contracts then are worth doing and worth the time and worth the work for the couple grand or cost share, whatever it comes back to that you're getting?
I think that in for timber work, it's phenomenal. I mean, I couldn't imagine not doing it. I plan to enroll the rest of the farm. I mean, we started with like 50 or 60 acres enrolled and they break that down. But I mean, I plan to enroll the entire farm and, um, I love it. I mean, I think it's fantastic. I think that if you have like my forester, she's freaking awesome that I work with, and she's a big outdoorsman. She turkey hunts, she deer hunts. I mean, she's killed some slammer bucks. And when I talk to her about like hunting technique, like, hey, what do you think? Like, I'm going to leave this bottom as a thicket, and I'm going to kill those deer on the top where the wind. And she's like, oh, absolutely. And like, hey, this little area here, she's like, there's no money value. What if we take this little half acre and do a clear cut within this culture removal? So it's a 17-acre bottom. Now you might cut 1,000 trees, but then in the center of that, all of a sudden, she's like, hey, you're a big wildlife guy. Look at this ridge here. She's looking at the trees. She's like, there's no money value here. By releasing this, you're going to get some of these money trees off on the sides, the ability to grow up over the next few years, anyways. Let's do a half acre here and just clear cut it.
Awesome.
So to me, I'm sure somebody has had a bad experience, but to be able to maximize timber value, wildlife value, um, and make some money doing it seems kind of like a no brainer to me. So I would highly recommend it in timber. I can't speak for CRP and things like that because I just are the way our farm lays out, we just aren't able to take advantage of those programs.
Yeah, no, well said. I think that some of the, you know, cons of that could just be time. Like it takes a little bit of time to get these things going, and you have to be intentional about meeting with the forester, getting the paperwork in at the certain deadlines. But it also gives you a roadmap on how to manage your forest for those who might not know. Um, and then, I mean, I don't know what programs you're in, but like at the 70, I'm in QFP, and
Mm.
that reduces taxes by
Yep.
quite a bit. So I'm going to do that on the 40 because our taxes here are just, I don't even want to talk about it without getting pissed off. They're ridiculous. So I mean, I have her number right here. I'm going to call to get them out there to try to get something going on the 40 too, because I'm already out there cutting. Um, I might as well put a program to it of whatever we come up with together for that, a roadmap, and then get the benefits from it too. So
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that there's sometimes a fear or a hesitation, like, oh, well, I'm going to do hinge cuts and my forester's not going to like that. And you might have to meet them in the middle on a little bit of stuff,
Yeah.
like, but again, in my experience, I kind of express like there are areas where I like doing hinge cuts and there are areas where I like doing flush cuts. And, I'm gonna be one of the landowners that's out here doing the work. You've seen it, we probably talked about I got to host an event, through State of Ohio Forestry last year at the farm because of the work I've done. So they've really worked with me. If there's an area
Yeah.
along the edge of the field where I'm like, I want to hinge cut this to create a frontal point by this box blind, they've never once said, "Oh, you shouldn't have done that." Like it's never been.
That's cool.
So I don't think you should. Not you, but like in general. And I was probably intimidated about this 15 years ago, right? Like I've been at this a while and talking to folks and getting to know folks. So um, be patient, But as you gain your confidence, have those discussions, have those calls, and some of the stuff they're going to have you do is not as sexy. I mean, it's not as fun as I know Cody Altizer, I think, just did a video on that. He's like, it's not as sexy as running a chainsaw releasing a white oak, but going in and treating these invasives and stuff. And you might not see it immediately, but as I mentioned in the beginning here, like you will see the sky open up and you will go in there and go, man, look at these blackberry brambles. And man, look at these deer trails coming through here. And you'll start to really be impressed by what you can do with a little bit of herbicide in time. And
Yeah.
that's something that I think I was kind of like, I just want to run a chainsaw. And after doing it, now like I really enjoy, even though it's kind of sucks because it's summer, but like I really enjoy doing that work.
Yeah. Are you so you mentioned you haven't gone in and done cleanups in some of your heavy cut area where you're dropping the trees and making a big tornado zone, etc. Um, Tell me a little bit more about that. I'm to the point now where on the 40, I was just cutting out there this weekend. It's a mess. I've made a mess. And I made even more of a mess. And well, first I got my truck stuck. The first 2 minutes I was there. That was cool. And then I bent my bar on the second tree. So that was cool. I didn't want to fall the right way. So but I ended up getting it fixed. It's just a slight tweak. I got it fixed up and but now I'm to the point where it's like before I go cut any more trees down, I kind of need to do some manicuring in this little, acre area just to make it a little bit navigable. And you're talking about a big bottom. That's a little bit different. They're going to have room in there, but like where do you where do you go in with your fine tuning manicure work and where do you not?
Well, I think the biggest thing that gives me this advantage is just the terrain. I
Yeah.
mean, the scale I'm working with is also beneficial in that way, right? There's also some negatives, right? Because you just don't have the time to do this
Yeah.
pristine manicure work. Like I'm envious. I like to watch Colin, he does some great videos on his YouTube where he's going, and I'm like, man, my driveway isn't that flat. Like there's nothing that's that flat, where I'm cutting. So that naturally is going to give you just funnels and gaps and stuff. Like I'm talking, I fell a sassafras tree. I did this big face cut, and made a nice wedge, came through with the back cut and it fell perfectly. This tree though was falling off of a rock face. I mean, that tree fell, it bounced off that rock like a catapult down into this bottom because it's like, so now like that tree's out of the way. Like those deer can come under that bench where there's this big rock face where these other trees, there's enough soil there where there's like full size trees growing. And now they can just scoot around when there's just nothing but a stump there. So I use that's kind of an extreme example because I mean, but a lot of it just kind of falls naturally through, and the deer will just work their way, around the treetop. They eat their way through the treetop. Now there's a gap. Um, there are certainly areas where I'm like, oh man, especially coming into a field. That's where I would probably say I do my most like manicure work, where it's edge feathering. Last year, Brian and I did this huge, say huge for me, uh, edge feathering project around this field that there was a road there. I wanted to get better coverage or screening. And then there's a field up on top, and then there's another big field down below. And in between, which is basically maples. like just junk maple and some sumac, things like that. So we went in there and we're like, let's make this thick as we can get it. And we just cut and we cut and we cut. And there were some crooked cherries in there and we cut and fell. And there are some areas I would like to still go in and cut back a little bit just to kind of let the deer skirt the edge through that thicket. But as we were cutting, we were very clear on, okay, there's a deer trail here. So, a tree fell over it. Like, let's not cut that deer trail. We wanted that deer trail still. So we just open it up just enough, deer can get through. And similarly, we want to make sure those two fields were connected. So as we did our major cutting, we went back through and cut all the way clear down to where, I mean, it's a cattle path. I mean, this trail is just unbelievable. Um, so I don't think you can do too much fine tuning. I don't like say like, oh, I didn't do it and it's fine. You shouldn't. I think you can really do a great job and steer deer, or at least give them options. And then if they're not using some of the paths, like, okay, let's cut that off. And so it follows them
Yes.
more, or they're occasionally using it. Um, but for me, like I said, I try to at least keep one or two core ones open and then, um, leave the rest. And how it is. Again, every area is different, but the day I killed my buck last season, I had seen 5 or 7 deer that night. And I had made the comment to Brian and to my cousin Zach, like, every one of them deer came off a different trail, including the buck I killed. Like, so I don't think you want to squeeze the deer down so bad to where they only have one trail
Right.
because, that big mature buck might not feel comfortable using that trail. And you want to make sure that he can come down where he wants to come down. So um, I think that's another difference is there's so much bedding in southeastern Ohio. There's so much cover that um, they'll kind of tell you where they want to be, and then you can go in after and fine tune. But my biggest thing is I'm cutting as best as I can. Um, I do mostly flush cutting, so I'm not, which helps too, because the deer, it stuff's on the ground. So the deer within like not very long, that stuff's breaking down. It's amazing how fast it happens. But I think I did a video on where I'll put like a hinge cut where I'm like, man, it'd be a great spot where a deer could come up. Maybe they're not going to bed there all the time, but they can lay right up against that hinge cut and they're adjacent to a field. And like that little fine tuning stuff, like, okay, they got this big bottom that I cut hard. They can come up and there's a couple of unique hinge cuts here and there where a deer could lay right under there. Oh, and now they're 50 yards off a field. And with the northeast
Hmm.
wind, I'm in this box blind. They're thinking they're getting the wind from that clear cut. Well, I'm downwind of them. So they're going to come up, they're going to come into this field from chewing their cud, and they're going to pop out at 20 yards. Like that's kind of where I've done most of my fine tuning is like probably within 50 yards of field's edge.
Yeah, I like that. I like how you are kind of mapping it out visually too with, hey, they can, they're 30, 40, 50 yards off the field. There might be a hinge cut, or in my case, I have a top that's sitting there. So now I'm kind of working this top as the center hub on this little ridge I have. And then I'm going in once I fell all the trees towards the top, and I'm going in, I'm just making sure they can get up in there a little bit. And they'll chew their way up there, sure. But um like you said, if the buck doesn't want to come down that main trail, or for me, my main logging road that's planted and vitalized, because he thinks it might be a little, he's a big buck, he's not going to get shot. And he might take those other little pathways that are cut right through the cover. And either way, he's going to be, near where I'm hunting.
Yep.
I would agree that you don't want to make it too blocked off. Deer will crawl on their belly like a dog. I've heard. I've never seen that. My dad has, but like they'll get through some stuff. But I just think having that, I don't know, navigable area through there to browse on both sides, they're going to keep it open for you. You just got to give it to them in the first place.
Absolutely.
A little
And
bit of fine
sometimes
tuning.
it's unfortunate. I've done it where I'm fine tuning an access road into a blind and I'm thinking, okay, this is perfect, really good access. And then I open it up and I trim it so I can sneak down in. And, sure as shoot, you go back down in there and there's a whole bunch of deer tracks on it. And you're like, you got to be kidding me, you know? Um, so yeah, I think a lot of times with the cutting on the edge, like doing the edge feathering and stuff, it's not always like putting, making it where you want the deer to go, but it's making it where you don't, right?
Right.
Like I don't want them using this path, so I am going to put a hinge cut at a high angle to where it's going to be difficult for them unless they are crawling on their belly, or maybe if you have a couple trees, you can stick some stuff because I know some guys use fencing, which I think is a
Yeah.
great idea. Guys, well, a deer could jump. Yeah, they could, but if you're talking 20 yards of fencing, and then your blind is here, and now 20 yards from that fence where you're downwind, you're in the blind. So now they're upwind of you at 10 yards, but it's a clear path. It's like, well, are they going to go through that thicket and then jump that fence to get into the field? Or are they going to walk down that trail to where your wins and they advance? So I think there's a lot of little things that you can do to steer them. Um, and that's again with our terrain, I think that's really the best use of time. Another
Yep.
thing too, when you're talking about cutting, is like what is the goal? So is the goal maximizing bedding? Well, that's a little bit different than I'm just trying to maximize. My biggest goal is I want food. Like we have a lot of deer. They're not
Yeah.
calling and saying, "Hey, there's no place to bed." Like we have a lot of deer. We have a lot of terrain. We have a lot of natural thickets. Some are like invasive species, like multiflora roses, but we have a lot of that in the neighborhood. But like I mentioned, what we don't have enough of is for the number of deer is food, right? Even with planting the amount of acreage that we're planting and as much cutting as we're doing. So my biggest goal is, man, I want as many stump sprouts and
Hmm.
treetops down and let the deer figure out the rest. Because you're not going to block off a 20-acre bottom in southeastern Ohio with the terrain features. You're just not going to make that where, maybe a true tornado could. But like a human is, you're not going to make that to where a deer couldn't get through it. I mean, I don't think I don't. I
Right.
shouldn't talk in absolutes, but from running a saw for 3 hours and you turn around and go, man, I fell 1,000 trees. And you're like, well, it looks decent, but it almost looks like,
Yeah.
you know, and so my point in all of that is that I think sometimes it's like, well, what's your goal? So my goal is always trying to maximize browse because I'm not seeing like an issue of holding deer. The deer I killed this year was 7.5. I had pictures of them since 2021 as a 2022 as a 4-year old. I'd have to go back and look now, but like we've we just don't have that issue, and I don't think most people do in this part of the country, right? Like Appalachia is inherently big timber, big terrain, so I think it's a little bit different. Whereas maybe in your situation, okay, I got 40 acres and there's 200 acres of beans and 100 acres of corn and golf, whatever, right? Like a lot more. Oh, well, that's, man, not only do I need to make it thick for bedding and or thick for food, I need to make it thick for bedding and super maneuverable
Security.
for the
Yeah.
deer to feel secure. So I think when we talk timber, sometimes it all gets lumped into one, but I think there are different targets and goals, within that. There's nothing better than seeing a deer chew on a stump sprout. I mean, I think that's like, I mean, I love watching deer feed in the food plot, but there's something about you go and look at a stump and it's got some sprouts coming. You see where the deer just stood and I'm like, that's cool.
I couldn't agree more. I think what I thought was pretty cool last year, we had the logging done. Oh, they were still logging like September 27th, maybe, getting the last load of logs out of there first week in October. And then I snuck in there with my daughter. I had a blind in like the dead center, which isn't what I normally recommend, but for time purposes, that's where the logger helped me roll it on the trailer and get it to, and then I fine tuned it with my truck one day. And um, but what was cool is we come around the corner all around this pond and right almost to the blind man, and the bedding area I'm working on now is just off to our right. We're climbing the ladder into the blind, and I mean we're blowing. We blew like 10 or 12 deer out of there, and they come running right by us, 5 or 6 does in a row, and it wasn't cool at the time, but looking back now, I'm halfway up that ladder. We're getting in the blind. I watch a nice 8 point sneak out the south end off the property. Next thing you know, here's this big 10 point coming through there. He didn't know why all the does ran. He didn't see us or smell us. But having done all that timber work, knowing where they bed now, for sure. I had an idea. Now I know for sure. And watching a big, 3.5, 4.5 year old 140-inch 10 point step up out of your logging is pretty awesome. So now I know where to move the blind. I know where to change my access. I know what to fine tune to kind of further enhance that. And Michigan are the hunting pressure is so crazy that I have to give them the thickest, nastiest stuff.
I
And then
think
the
it
food
too.
too,
It's good to give them. I think it's good to give them like we always talk about diversity, and I've always felt that way in betting as well, because there's a lot of really good deer hunters that I'm friends with and or have followed, and I'm sure some of them are the same guys you have, and especially in hill country, they'll talk about military crest and how a deer, a big buck might want to bed, and I don't think that's homogeneous around every mature buck. I think some bucks are going to want to be in the thickest, nastiest, multiflora rows, clear cut thicket, that they can get their hand. And others are observers. They like to be up high. They want to be able to see, smell, and I think that just has a lot to do with individualism, within the different deer. But I think that, in my opinion, like having a mix. So if you cut hard and in a bottom, okay, but maybe on a top or halfway up the top, that military crest is what, three-quarters of the way up the top, where well, maybe that's a spot where um, it's not as thick, right? You have a couple of trails coming up out, and then you kind of maybe have a little hinge cut, or you flush cut a tree and then have the tree laying there, and where the deer can bed up against it. But those little tweaks, I think. So you give them both best of both worlds. The deer likes to be up because there's a little bit of a terrain feature, even in flat ground. I've heard you talk about that before, where you can find a slight,
that's what
increase
I'm
in
talking
elevation
about. Yep.
change, and you're like, okay, well that buck maybe he wants to be able to see. So I don't want to make it so thick in that particular spot, but all leading up to it, I want security, because
Yep.
a lot of those are going to like to just, a lot. It's pretty well known. I have some spots on the farm where you can climb into a blind and it's thick, thick on the sides. Like you're just from years ago of timber harvest, and you won't be in the blind for 30 minutes oftentimes, and you just start seeing does like pop, like just
Yep.
pop out of this thick stuff, and normally you'll see the bucks come up on the ridges much later, but they'll pop out almost where you can tell they're bedding up along these ridge tops under these oaks. They can see, smell, etc. So I think having diversity in within your bedding and within your cutting strategies um, is helpful. I always like to try to mix it up. Like I'll cut some trees low, I'll cut some a little bit higher. I'll hinge cut some high and I'll hinge cut some low. I'll
I
hinge cut
agree.
one way to push deer around, and so just always trying to do little things. And I don't do as good of a job as a lot of these guys, like you said, going back in and cutting these beautiful trails. And it's not that I don't want to; it's more so just a function of time. But all of that said, I've been really happy with being able to see how the deer have just naturally kind of figured it out, But
Yep.
again, I think my terrain helps with that a bit. I would be more focused on that fine tuning. If it's flat ground, you lay everything over. I think you're definitely going to have to go in there and cut your trails through.
Yep. Exactly. And I don't know about you. I want to hear how much more cutting you have left to do. Well, I probably know the answer to that. Before it gets to food plot season here, I think before I cut any more and make any more of a mess, I need to get in there and clear the trails off that I fell trees over. Get the grapple back in there and get my kind of expanded food plots, expanded kill plots opened up just a little better before I go make more of a mess, or I'm going to be underwater in this whole thing.
Yeah.
So, like, I was felling trees and I put one. The maple was super tall, and I dropped it. And I didn't realize my logging road right behind that treetop was right there. So I blocked the path with my own cut. I'm like, son of a gun. I'm spending like 20 minutes cutting that tree up so I can get back through there. And so I'm gonna after I get the 70 cleaned up, I'm gonna get the tractor back down here and get in there, clean some stuff up on the tractor for a while, and then probably do a little bit more cutting. Um, when the leaves are on the trees, just so I know how much sunlight is getting to these kill plots. Because they're not very big and it's all timber. So I still have some more work to do, but I think I need to stop for a minute, catch up, see, assess where I'm at, and then go in there and cut some more before, spring and fall planting. So Where are you at? How much more do you have to do before you're planting your spring plots here?
Well, I mean, I'm going to cut until I really can't anymore. I mean, I may even be
Yeah.
planting and have somebody else on the tractor, and I might be cutting because I want to finish up my NRCS stuff.
Yeah.
Um, but I mean, honestly, the edge of fields is never ending. I mean, like I said, Brian and I cut this area last year. We spent 2 or 3 days putting around this little half-acre food plot, and I really thought, man, now that place we did do a good job of fine tuning. Again, like I said, as we fell, we knew there were trails coming into this food plot, and we're like, all right, that tree fell over, so I just cut it up as I went, and it was a lot easier, kind of. But again, we're not doing a big bedding area, and then trying to, we were just kind of edge feathering, but I don't know, 50 yards all the way around this big circle, other than the area by the road where I'm like, I just want that to be, thick as heck. Um, so, you know, for me, I don't. I go back and look at that area Brian and I cut, and I'm already like, man, why didn't I cut this? Or and it's like just little things. So I will continue to cut. One thing I haven't done a video on it yet, but I do want to, that I've been trying to get better at is because it's like you get to you're trying to do 100 things, but just keeping the chainsaw in the buggy or in the four wheeler or whatever. Um, because there's times where I'm just going to check a field, look at browse pressure, and I'll look and I'll see like 4 or 5 staghorn sumac. And I'm like, man, I could cut all of those and just lay them on the edge, especially in winter, right? Like the food plots, I'm not really that worried about them. The deer are in there eating what's green. Deer season's over, and within 5 minutes, if you have your saw with you, you went and checked a couple things, switched out a camera, whap, 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 get all 3 of them down, or 4 of them down, whatever it is, let the deer eat on it. And then in the spring, you go through and just throw them into the brush or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's like just having the saw with you all the time. I think every time you go to a field, just do a little bit, can be
Yeah.
a good method. Just don't rush, you got to be safe. But so for me, man, it's never ending. I mean, the amount of cutting that I can or need to do over the next 20 years is probably will never get done, which is kind of a junky way to think about it, but realistically, I mean, I could probably cut every day for the next 20 years and probably not accomplish what I would like to, just because of, there's a lot of timbered acres and the terrain and all the different things that uh, speed you up or slow you down. So for me, I'll be cutting pretty hard, and then it'll be spring food plot season.
Do you have any one more question on this? Do you have any go-to gadgets, sharpeners, wedges, anything that you always have with you when you're out there cutting that you would, if you forgot it, you'd be like, son of a gun. Like anything like that that you always have with you when you're out there?
Extra chains, chainsaw tools. So I'm not against sharpening a chain, but I think I buy, they're on Amazon. Big Eight, I think, is the brand that I've found good. I got like 4 chains for like $40.
That's pretty good.
So it's like it would take me, and even when you sharpen in the field with a file, unless you're a pro, and I am not, I mean, it's not as good as a new chain. So I found, I'm like, listen, if I can save the chain, I can take it somewhere and have it professionally sharpened if I want. And that's fine. I've done that before. But for the most part, if a chain gets dull or whatever, and I've run that same chain I've probably been using for, gosh, I probably cut 7, 8 acres with that. I mean, it's been phenomenal. I mean, it's been a really good chain. Um, but if I do feel like, yeah, it's just not throwing the ribbons like I want to, then I just take the son of a gun off and put on a fresh chain.
Yeah.
For $40, it's probably last me a year worth of chains, and it might be a little bit more than that. Don't quote me, but it's something like that. I mean, it's not. It's like $10 or $20 a chain at the most. It's not like the steel chains that are what $60 or something.
Yeah.
So, um, so that's one. Obviously, chainsaw tool. I have a little backpack, so that's been the easiest thing for me. Is I have like an old backpack that I just keep in wedges, little sledge. Uh, Normally, I have a bottle in there, a small bottle that I can put bar oil in, and then another one that I can put another thing of mixed gas. And that way, I can run a couple of tanks worth if I'm in a bottom versus trying to climb up and down. Um, so those would probably be, my biggest ones. I can throw that backpack on. I can set it down and just work in a little area, and that's been my best decision because then I have everything in one spot.
That's funny. I did the same thing this weekend after I got the truck stuck. I'm like, well, I'm not driving back to the spot. So backpack, packed it full of the chainsaw tool. I had some gas. I bought one of those little convenience cans just to have so I could refill it at the truck without a big can. What else I have? Threw my chaps in there, Gatorade in there, and was able to hike it back to where I was at. And then I worked back there for the day and then hiked out when I was done. So yeah, I think the backpack's a great idea.
Yeah,
I try not to get any fuel or oil on it. It's my nice latitude pack, so I was trying not to get it too messy. But a tree's got to get cut, so
yeah,
you got to do
yeah,
what you got to do.
absolutely. And I think the biggest tip for cutting trees is um, always be learning, always be
Yeah,
observing. I think don't cut something you're not comfortable cutting. Especially if you're by yourself. Um, you are going to get to a point, just like anything. Eventually you're going to have to swing a little bit harder if you want to hit a home run, right? Like you're going to have to get to a point where you can't cut a 20-inch tree without cutting a 20-inch tree, right? But like I think the biggest thing is it's okay to work up to that. Like I
yeah,
know for
100%.
me, like I didn't start off cutting big trees. Like I started off cutting honestly a lot of firewood. So a tree would be down and I cut it up, or an ash tree would be down and somebody called me. I have wood burners and my old house. I have wood burners here. We have wood burners at the farm. Like so, all right, 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 and just even that can teach you a lot about control. And I'm still learning. I mean, I've recently got a new helmet because I had a helmet without a face shield and cutting some trees, this and that, and sawdust got into my eye. It was like 10 hours of just agony. Of just have just some sawdust in my. So that was something where I'm like, this is stupid. I'm not spending the money to get a new helmet. Because of I have a helmet, but I didn't have a face shield. Like, so I think there's just a lot of things that you kind of pick up and learn, tricks of the trade, if you will. But the biggest thing is safety. And you can't
Yeah.
be safe enough wearing chaps. I've nicked chaps more than once, and I've seen a lot of videos of guys, I think even Dr. Craig Harper has a video and you can tell like his chaps have you know, it happens to guys who have extreme experience. You're stepping over something and you're not hitting it full throttle. It's typically what happens is after you've cut through the tree and you're turning, that blade, it still has, turns, rotations per minute, right? It's still ripping. And it touches your chaps and the chaps do what it's supposed to do. It just protects you, and it might cut your chaff a little bit. And technically, you should get new chaps at that point. Um, but if that was your bare leg or, just in blue jeans, you probably aren't going to cut into an artery at that, if you're just barely, but you could. And if
You
you're by
could.
yourself, like that's something, and these chaps today, again, on Amazon, I bought a couple pair, I think they're Forester brand. Oh, they're so daggum comfortable, man. I could wear them to church. I mean, they're comfortable. They're not long. They fit good. I bought them a little shorter because I don't like to be tripping on them. So I bought, I don't know, an inch or two shorter than I typically would wear like in blue jeans. So they're above my boot. Like just little tips like that, I think can make you mobile and comfortable and most importantly safe.
That'd be a good new YouTube video. Watching you go to church in your chaps. That'd be a good one there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, we've been seeing the vitalized orders really take off over the past 2 weeks here. Now that April's hit, so thanks to everybody who's supporting us and getting their stuff put in. Um, I still have a little bit of time before I'm putting mine in based on soil temps, but it's happening with people who are further south than me. I mean, what are your 5 day averages right now? Do you know?
I don't. I mean, just starting now to get in. We had a little bit of snow, just flurries, nothing, of accumulation, but
Yeah,
within the last week, so um, we're still a little bit cold, but things are greening up. I mean, the carbon load's
yeah.
popping out of the ground. This Friday, we're going to be at almost 80. So I mean,
Okay.
we're seeing some good upticks in temperature. I've been planting our mixes for a long time, or at least some version, and I will be planting mid-May. That's my go-to. I've tried planting early one year. And then I kind of made up the phrase, which I'm sure somebody else has said before, but I said, let your cover crop work for you. And,
Yeah.
we have so much good stuff in the carbon load that it's like, yes, it's going to be probably in a good position tomorrow. But like, I don't want to leave it. I want that to let it get up, let it get tall, let it get the biomass so it can smother out weeds when you roll it over. Like, and obviously as that's growing, you're getting more root growth, more photosynthesis is happening, more above ground biomass, and hopefully more below ground biomass. So for me, I've kind of found that sweet spot like around mid May. I think
Yeah.
that's a good mix between I get a ton of good tonnage, a ton of good biomass
I
from
knew what you meant.
the nitro boost, and I'm also getting a lot out of the carbon load that had previously been there. So that's my goal, regardless. I mean, if we hit soil temps that are a little bit warmer sooner, that's why we put in the best annual clovers we can in that carbon load, because I'm going to let those go to work. Let those fix nitrogen. You might have seen the video I pulled out when we were shed hunting. That was 2 3 weeks ago, and I pulled out a fixation balanza, and I mean the end fixation along the root mass is just phenomenal. And I had to cut that out with a knife. So I'm sure that I broke off, a lot of the root mass. I didn't dig it out with a shovel or anything. So let that go to work for you. Let that fix the end. Let that break up soil compaction. So my goal is mid-May. Now I will tell you that I am so happy with having gone in on some of my more poor fields, and I frost seed our annual clover in towards the end of March, mid to
Okay.
end of March. So like kind of your tail end of frost seeding season for this part of the world. But it's what do we charge? $39 an eight for 6 pounds, right? So I would tell
Yeah.
people if you wanted just a monoculture of that, I would probably increase the seeding rate. But the reason we're saying 6 pounds for that is like I put 12 pounds on 3 acres, right? Um, so, or no, 12 pounds on 2 acres, excuse me, 2 acres. And I put, I think, 2 or 3 bags on the 3 acre field, something along those lines. And I'm just trying to fill in gaps where these two new fields, they had been dozed. I have the rows from the carbon load and the drill, which look great. The deer are hammering it, so they're removing a lot of biomass. There's 6 or 7 inches of difference already between exclusion fence and out. So I broadcast that annual clover mix in there, and it absolutely a couple rains, some soil temps are warming, and it's jumping out of the ground. So instead of just having rows greening up, now the entire field is green, clover and grains and everything. Now I'm just going to let that go until a whole nother month, and then I'll drill the
Yep.
nitro boost right through it. So I don't do that on every one of my fields because a lot of them don't necessarily need it. The carbon load did great. They have a bunch of biomass. They've been in the system for a long time. The organic matters percentages are good. But on these fields that were newly dozed and there's bare soil or bare dirt there because of them being dozed, and other than the rows of the carbon load, that's where I think it's a great tool to use is that annual clover mix. And I've been really, really happy with the growth that I'm seeing out of that within 2 to 3 weeks.
Yeah, I'd agree. And I love that patch solution you're kind of referring to or calling it. Um, being with what I'm dealing with are compacted logging roads and clay. Um, I frost seeded all the same stuff, and I was out there this past weekend, and it's all coming up. They're really tiny, but we're behind you a little bit in terms of season. And man, there's clover popping up everywhere. And some of the spots where it was um a little bit better soil that hadn't been scraped off, or maybe some, the bottom of an area. Um, shoot, that stuff's up out of the ground, looking great. We have 4 inches of rain last week, probably why I got stuck. But there's clover underwater right now. It's just like a mat of green clover trying to come up through this logging road. Just it'll be maybe, drained out end of the week or something. But yeah, it popped up really well. And none of these areas were planted last fall because of my timing. I just got that little kill plot in. That's all I could get. So
Yeah.
it's really looking good with these logging roads. For that patchwork and that semi-shaded, it's logged, but it's still I could cut more trees. So I'm just gonna keep the leaves off it, throughout the year and keep hitting it again in those areas while I get my other kill plots kind of carved out for the nitro boost. But yeah, I'm with you. I'm probably gonna go mid to third week in May, depending on when I can get my tractor back down here and just to help carry some of the seed out there in case the roads are too slick. But it's on the mind. It's on people's mind too because everybody's ordering now. So it's that time.
Yeah. Yeah, it certainly is. It certainly is. I just went over a good customer and friend of ours soil samples. He sent me for six. He and I had a call today. I've been doing quite a few different ones, that we've been working on, and that's been exciting to kind of give them recommendations. One of the things that I see, and I would say probably 80% of the people I talk to, they're in no-till programs now. I mean, so many people are doing no-till, whether it's broadcast or with a drill, whether they're renting, they own one, something, right? And they get these soil tests, and the soil test, if you get recommendations with it, it'll say put phosphorus down, almost every time. And I look at them, I'm like, you have a lot of phosphorus in these soil tests. I go, we just need to make it
Available.
bioavailable to the plant. So there's a couple things you can do. One, I recommend our seed feed. I've done a lot of videos on that. I won't harp it anymore, but it's organic. You put it on the seed, it's just like a starter fertilizer. The same reason farmers put it on the seed or in a 2x2, right? They're trying to put it right where that roots are going to get it. Well, we don't have the benefit in most cases, right, of having that setup. So what do? You put it on the seed. And the next one is that Spectrum Plus Myco. I mean, that's a mycorrhizal fungi inoculant. I talk to guys a lot. I go, listen to some of the most recent, I think I shared it on our Vitalize page, the Regenerative Agriculture podcast. And this really, I mean, I've been using these for years, but this really stuck with me. And the gentleman is an agronomist out of Wisconsin or Minnesota, and he's talking about growing, pumpkins for competition. And he's like, every root that goes down into the soil, I forget there's a term for it, but I'm not going to pretend to remember it, but there's a specific term for that. So they have one fruit, right, that they've said that's the target. Well, then every root that comes down off that vine, they're spoon feeding that, Spectrum Plus Myco or mycorrhizal fungi inoculant, maybe not specifically the one we carry, which I think is a phenomenal offering, but they spoon feed every single one of those roots. And the interviewer, John Kempf is his name, who runs the Regenerative Agriculture podcast, says, but don't you find that in these areas where they're growing these pumpkins, you probably have mycorrhizal fungi already? And the guy goes, well, yes, but they don't want to wait for that time for those roots to get down in and then have that symbiotic relation. They want no time wasted. So that's why they will spoon feed every individual root that goes down in that mycorrhizal fungi. So I share that because then you go on. There was a gentleman he interviewed about. The gentleman's name is Matt Powers, who's been really big in. I can never think of the darn word, but looking at things through the microscope, microscopy, I think it is microscopy, and he's looking at it, and it's basically like studying bacteria and fungi and things like that in soil. And they interviewed him, and he came up with some different ways to light up the bacteria, which was really insightful, and light up the roots so you could really see what was happening. It's a pretty interesting guy. I think his education was in English, actually, and he got interested in this and taught himself. It was really cool. But what he talked about is like there's so much science now that shows one of the best ways to get mycorrhizal fungi inoculation, other than doing a root soak like with a tomato plant, right, is on the seed. So like I do it with tomatoes, peppers, and then every time I fill my drill up, and I will say if you're doing a drill or you have a drill, we recommend, it says 1 acre for 10 ounces. I think you can even stretch that a little bit because I found probably about 5 to 6 ounces. The seed looks pretty well covered. So you can kind of eyeball it because seed size changes slightly, right? And
Hmm.
if you're doing a corn seed versus a soybean, and was it a wet year? Was it a dry year? So the biggest thing is if you're adding that seed feed and you're adding this, just make sure you get good coverage. So there's three things I put in every time: seed armor on our Nitro Boost and Carbon Load, which comes with it. I put Tanio, and I put seed feed. And even in a drought last year, worst drought in 100 years or whatever it was, um, and I mean, you've seen the picture. We had some really good biomass. I think that's a testament to good soil health principles, getting good seeds off to a good start through no tilling and also some of those additional amendments, and just being able to hold any type of moisture that we had um, in literally the worst drought in 100 years. So that's something that I think is very common. The one other thing I'll mention on soil tests and stuff, guys, we have our micronutrients, which are great, and we sell a ton of them. We have our fish fertilizer. Again, it's a great foliar product. We sell a ton of it, but it all starts with a good soil sample. Whether you buy Ward off our website or you go to somebody else, make sure they're giving you pH, organic matter, micronutrients, base saturations. I cannot tell you how many people, and it bums me because like anybody who knows me, I like helping people. Like whether you buy Vitalize or not, I hope you do, but it kills me when somebody sends me something and I'm like, I don't know. Like I'm not gonna BS you. Like I either need to feel extremely confident in my recommendations, or I'm gonna say I don't know because there's not enough data. And
Yep.
that stinks. That really, really stinks. So we can sometimes calculate stuff depending on what they give you. But you got to have CEC, you got to have micros, you got to have macros. And then we can decide based on budget, okay, here's what I would do year one. And this gentleman who I've been working with, this I think we just talked that he said his second or third year, he and I have worked together. And he's like, man, we're really fine tuning things now. Like he used our micronutrients, he's used our seed feed, he's used our Spectrum Plus Micro, and things are really looking good and solid on his test. And we're just fine tuning now. Like now he has a couple micronutrients that are right on the edge. So he might put a little bit down. He might wait a year and see where they're at and then put some down. Like we're adjusting. Where do you need to be from a structural perspective, a pH perspective, and then let's let biology do the rest of the work through diverse root systems and well balanced mixes.
It makes sense to me, and that's what I've been talking to people about is just the diversity of the root structure. We talked about that at that Deer Hunter Collective. The different plants in the Nitro Boost Spring Mix. That's what I'm most excited about in that mix is how it works for us all summer long. So I got some sand up north, I have some clay down here, and I need that different root system to get in there and help me because I need the good plots. I need them. So
It
I
makes
think
such a difference. And I think the other thing is like we've learned a lot from our customers. I mean, there's so many guys who are like, man, I love your Nitro Boost so much. I'm just going to broadcast carbon load into it and leave it stand because I want the cover. I'm
mhm.
in Michigan. I'm in Pennsylvania. I'm in a part of Ohio that is small parcels and a lot of pressure, whatever it might be, right? Like, and they come up and it's like, huh, I guess I hadn't thought about that as much, but that's a good idea. So maybe they double the rate of carbon load because they're just blowing it in with one of those blower spreaders or where but it's like, we've learned so much in different ways. I've had some people who are like, man, I love that carbon load so much from a fawning cover. They bought did 5 acres. They're like, I'm going to leave 2 acres in the carbon and just leave it all summer. So we're learning with some of these ideas from
Yeah, it's
some of
cool.
our customers, which is super cool. One of the things I plan to do as we're getting warmer, I plan on spraying some of my lower quality fields that are newer with our fish fertilizer to feed some of that stuff I just talked about earlier. I want to give it a jump out of the ground. That fish fertilizer acts as biostimulant, not only for the plants, but for the soil. So as the soil's warming up, man, I want to hit that flush, let that stuff get a little bit of shot of nutrients jump up out of the ground to further help with building that soil up in those particular areas before I go in there putting Nitro Boost. So you're right. I mean, the change in root systems is is so critical. The term is nutrient stratification. I have a couple videos on that on our YouTube channel. But having those different root systems is really really critical if you're committed to a no-till program.
Yep. Yep. Well, good work, dude. I would urge if anybody wants to know further into the technical side of this, Al's been hammering out the content over at the Vitalize YouTube. We're trying to grow that. And he's got almost every subject covered, but we're still coming up with more ideas and you're continuing to pump that out. So check that out over there. We do also have bulk discounts that people have been taking advantage of that. at vitalizeseed.com, which we thought would be the case, but we weren't sure. And now we're seeing, you know, it's advantageous when you buy in bulk. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's advantageous for us, right? I mean, and it's advantageous for them. So we want to pass that on to the people that, you're buying, 5 acres or 10 acres or 20 acres or whatever it might be. So we appreciate every order, but obviously those the bundles are new. We've touched on it. We're adding more bundles. And again, the biggest things we learn from our customers. So if there are topics, I recently interviewed an animal scientist all about the rumen. How does that vary? What are some things we should look at, question, et cetera? We're trying to write more blogs. I just wrote one last Thursday or Friday. I can't
Thursday
remember
or Friday
exactly when I
last
put
week.
it.
Yep.
But I put it out there and that had really good feedback. Um, if there are topics that you're interested in as a listener, shoot us a message. Chances are I'm probably going to send you my cell phone number, say, hey, give me a call or send me a text. Let's talk. Like we want to hear from you guys and we want to learn like what topics are interesting to you because I'm trying to touch on all the topics from people I hear from, like, oh, why is phosphorus sitting in the top inch of my soil? Like, let's do a video on phosphorus immobility in the soil profile. But maybe there's other things that you're interested in that we haven't touched on, and we can. So trying to link that into I did a couple of videos recently on how am I linking timber management into a food plot layout, into access, into a blind, right? So I showed how there's a ridge and I'm going to cut it, and then there's a steep area where it's too hard to get the tractor in. So I have that in the clover, chicory, and oats, and then I overseed it with the clover plus. And then in the big flat field is in the 1-2 system because
Yep.
that's kind of the destination spot. I think that folks like that and the feedback's been, but maybe there's other things or you want to see more of something. So please let us know because, we're all ears and we're learning from our customers what you all want. And that's how we keep developing. So, Jared, always a pleasure, buddy. I know we could talk for like 3 days. I mean, it's always a pleasure to get together with you, whether it was recorded or not. I mean, it's
We
always
talk
fun to
quite a
catch
bit.
up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, hey, thanks for your time today, Al. And good luck spring planting. I'm sure we'll talk to you back on here soon.
Sounds good, buddy. Thank you.